Ambassador Crystal stood at the observation window of the Galactic Council station, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he watched the planet below. Vareth 7 was a dead world. Its atmosphere was thick with sulfur dioxide and ammonia. Its surface was covered in black volcanic rock and pools of acid that glowed a sickly yellow under the dim light of its dying star. Nothing had ever lived there. Nothing could ever live there. And yet, 3 Terran colony ships were descending through the toxic clouds. "They are insane," Crystal said to his aide, a young Valorian named Tass. "Truly, completely insane." Tass clicked his mandibles in agreement. The Terrans have requested settlement rights to 17 toxic worlds in this sector alone. The Council granted them all without debate. No other species wanted them. Crystal remembered that meeting well. The representatives of the elder races had laughed when the Terran delegate made her request. Vareth 7 was considered worthless. It was a world that existed only on star charts as a navigation hazard. The Terrans could have it, along with all the other poison rocks they desired. That had been 5 standard cycles ago. Now Crystal was here as an official observer, sent by the Council to document what everyone assumed would be a spectacular failure. The Terrans had a reputation for stubbornness, but surely even they could not survive on a world like this. The Council wanted proof of their failure. They wanted to show that Terran ambition had finally exceeded Terran ability. "Ambassador," Tass said, pointing at his data tablet, "the first colony ship has landed. They are deploying surface teams." Crystal watched the feed from the orbital sensors. Small figures in bulky environmental suits emerged from the ship. They moved with purpose across the black rock, carrying equipment and containers. Some drove vehicles that looked heavy and powerful. Others walked in groups, planting devices into the ground. "What are those?" Crystal asked. Tass consulted his tablet. Atmospheric processors, according to the manifest they filed with the station. They brought over 3,000 of them. 3,000, Crystal's eyes widened. That is not enough, not nearly enough. This world's atmosphere is 90% toxic gases. You would need millions of processors working for centuries to make any meaningful change. "I believe the Terrans know this, Ambassador." "Then why bother?" Tass had no answer. Over the following days, Crystal watched the Terran colony grow. They built sealed habitats from prefabricated modules, connecting them with pressurized tunnels. They dug into the rock and created underground chambers. They set up massive greenhouses with transparent walls that somehow resisted the acid rain. And everywhere they went, they planted things. Crystal did not understand this at first. The plants could not survive outside the greenhouses. The air would kill them instantly. But the Terrans kept planting anyway, covering the black rock with seeds and spores and genetically modified organisms that he could not identify. "Extremophiles," the Terran liaison officer explained when Crystal asked. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chen, and she had the calm patience that Crystal had learned to expect from Terran scientists. Organisms engineered to survive in extreme conditions. Some of them can actually thrive in this atmosphere. They eat sulfur dioxide and release oxygen. "But the concentration is so high," Crystal protested, "they will die." Dr. Chen smiled. It was a Terran expression that Crystal still found unsettling. "Some of them will, most of them will, but a few will survive, and those survivors will reproduce, and their offspring will be even better adapted. Give it time, Ambassador." Time, Crystal thought. The Terrans always talked about time, but they were such a short-lived species. A single Terran lifespan was barely a flicker compared to the elder races. How could they think in terms of planetary transformation when they would not live to see the results? He asked Dr. Chen this question. "We don't do it for ourselves," she said. "We do it for our children, and their children, and all the generations that will come after us. We plant trees whose shade we will never sit in. That's what it means to be Terran." Crystal did not understand this. The Valorians planned only for their own lives. The elder races thought in terms of their own generations, perhaps, but not beyond. The idea of sacrificing for descendants you would never meet was alien to him. He continued to observe. The first year was hard for the colonists. Equipment failed in the corrosive atmosphere. Habitats developed leaks that had to be repaired quickly or everyone inside would die. 3 colonists were killed when an acid storm damaged their vehicle's seals. 17 more died from various accidents and system failures. The Terrans mourned their dead. They held ceremonies and planted memorial markers, and then they went back to work. By the end of the first year, the atmospheric processors had made a small but measurable change in the air composition. The sulfur dioxide concentration had dropped by 1%. It was nothing. It was meaningless in the grand scheme of things, but the Terrans celebrated as if they had won a great victory. More colony ships arrived. More settlers came. They brought more equipment, more seeds, more organisms. They expanded the habitats and dug deeper into the rock. They found water ice in the polar regions and began extracting it, pumping it through pipes to the main settlement. Crystal sent regular reports to the council. His initial predictions of failure began to seem premature. The colony was not thriving exactly, but it was surviving. It was growing, and the Terrans showed no signs of giving up. "They are like a disease," one council member commented during a review session. "They spread to places where they do not belong, and they refuse to die." Thought this was unfair, but he did not say so. He had developed a grudging respect for the colonists. They worked with a determination that he had never seen in any other species. They faced death every day and kept going. They buried their dead and celebrated their births. They built schools for their children and taught them that this poisoned rock was their home. "The Terrans believe they can transform this world," Crystal reported. "They believe they can make it into a garden. I confess, I do not know if they are right or wrong, but I have never seen any species try so hard." The council was not impressed. They had seen species fail before. They would see species fail again. The Terrans were entertaining, perhaps, but ultimately doomed. Everyone knew this. Everyone except the Terrans. At the end of the first standard cycle, the colony had 3,000 permanent residents. They had built a small city under domes and underground. They had established farms in pressurized greenhouses. They had created a functioning society on a world that should have killed them all. And they were just getting started. Dr. Chen invited Crystal to visit the surface. He accepted, curious despite himself. He wore a Terran environmental suit that felt strange and confining, and he descended to the colony in a reinforced shuttle. The settlement was larger than he expected. The domes caught the weak light of the star and glowed softly. Between them, pipes and tunnels connected everything like veins carrying blood. Vehicles moved along marked paths, and he could see Terrans walking in their suits, going about their daily business. But what struck him most was the color. Patches of green and brown and even blue were spreading across the black rock near the habitats. The engineered organisms were taking hold. They were small and struggling, and most of them would probably die. But some of them were living. Some of them were growing. 5 more years, Dr. Chen said, standing beside him on an observation platform. Maybe 10. We'll be able to walk outside without full suits, just breathing masks and protective clothing. In 20 years, we might not need those either. In 50 years, this will be a garden. Stared at the struggling patches of life on the dead rock. You truly believe this? I know this, Dr. Chen said. We've done it before. We'll do it again. This is what Terrans do, Ambassador. We take dead things and make them live. We take impossible places and make them home. It's not magic, it's just work. Hard work done by people who believe in the future. She turned to look at him, her eyes bright behind her helmet visor. Would you like to help us plant something? We're starting a new garden sector today. We could use another set of hands. hesitated. Observers were supposed to observe, not participate, but something about the offer touched him in a way he could not explain. "Yes," he said, "I would like that very much." And so Ambassador Crixtal of the Velorian Diplomatic Corps found himself on his knees in the toxic soil of a dead world, helping Terran colonists plant seeds that would not sprout for years. He did not understand why it felt important. He only knew that it did. The Terrans worked beside him, joking and laughing despite the danger and the difficulty. They welcomed him as one of their own. They taught him how to space the seeds and how to press them into the treated soil. They shared their water ration with him when he grew tired. "Why do you do this?" he asked a young colonist named Marcus, who could not have been more than 20 standard years old. "Why come to a place like this when there are comfortable worlds with breathable air?" Marcus shrugged inside his suit. "Because someone has to. Because if we don't claim these worlds, they'll just sit here dead forever. Because turning poison into gardens is the most Terran thing I can think of." He grinned, his teeth white against his dark skin. "Besides, have you seen the sunsets here? The chemicals in the atmosphere make them incredible. Purple and gold in colors I don't even have names for. You should stay and watch one sometime." Did stay. He watched the dying star sink toward the horizon, and he saw the toxic atmosphere catch its light and scatter it into bands of impossible color. It was beautiful, terrible and deadly and beautiful. Just like the Terrans themselves. 2 standard cycles passed. Ambassador Crixtal continued his observations, but his reports to the Council had changed in tone. He no longer predicted failure. He described progress, measured in small increments that added up to something remarkable. The atmospheric processors had multiplied. The colonists manufactured new ones from local materials, building factories that produced more machines to clean the air. The sulfur dioxide concentration had dropped by 5%, still deadly to most species, but measurably better. The engineered organisms were spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Some of them had evolved in ways the Terran scientists had not expected, becoming even more efficient at processing the toxic gases. Natural selection was working alongside artificial design, creating new forms of life adapted specifically to Verath 7. And the colony was growing. New ships arrived regularly, bringing supplies and settlers. The population had reached 12,000. The underground city had expanded into a network of connected settlements. Schools had turned into a university. Hospitals had become research centers. What had started as a desperate foothold on a hostile world was becoming a civilization. Crixtal spent more and more time on the surface. He had been given quarters in the main habitat, and he had learned to move through the pressurized tunnels without assistance. The colonists had accepted him as a fixture of their community. Children waved to him. Adults nodded in greeting. He was no longer an outsider watching from orbit. He was a witness to something extraordinary. "You've changed," Dr. Chen observed one day. They were walking through one of the newer greenhouses where crops grew in carefully controlled conditions. "When you first arrived, you thought we were fools." "I thought you were insane," Crixtal corrected. "I still think you are insane, but I have come to believe that insanity can be a kind of wisdom." Dr. Chen laughed. "That's the most diplomatic thing anyone has ever said about us." The greenhouse was full of plants that Crixtal did not recognize. Some of them were food crops, genetically modified to thrive in the weak light and mineral-rich soil. Others were experimental, designed to be transplanted outside once conditions improved. Still others were simply beautiful flowers that the colonists grew because they wanted beauty in their lives, even here. "This one," Dr. Chen said, stopping beside a small tree with silver leaves. "We call it a hope tree. We plant one in every new settlement. They're slow-growing, but they live for centuries. This one will still be here long after everyone who planted it is dead." Touched one of the silver leaves. It was soft and cool against his fingers. And that does not make you sad, to plant something you will never see mature. It makes me happy, Dr. Chen said. It means we believe there will be a future. It means we're not just surviving here, we're building something that will last. A group of children ran past, laughing and playing some game that Crystal did not understand. They were born on Verath 7, he realized. This toxic world was the only home they had ever known. They did not see it as hostile or impossible. They saw it as normal. They will be the ones who inherit what we build, Dr. Chen said, watching them go. They'll be the ones who finally walk outside without suits. They'll be the ones who see this world become a garden. We're doing all of this for them. Thought about his own people, the Valorians. They lived long lives and planned carefully for their own futures, but they did not think about generations they would never meet. They did not sacrifice present comfort for distant descendants. It seemed wasteful to them, spending resources on people who did not yet exist. But watching the Terran children play, Crystal began to understand. The Terrans were not wasteful. They were generous. They gave gifts to the future because they believed the future mattered. They worked hard not for their own benefit, but for the benefit of children not yet born. It was a strange kind of love, but it was love nonetheless. I would like to plant another hope tree, Crystal said, if you will allow it. Dr. Chen smiled. I would like that very much. They went to the nursery together and Crystal chose a seedling with his own hands. It was small and fragile, barely a stick with a few leaves. But inside it was the potential for centuries of growth, centuries of life, centuries of hope. He planted it near the observation platform where he had stood on his first visit. The soil had been treated to support Terran plant life, and the seedling took hold easily. Crystal pressed the earth around its base and watered it with recycled water and felt something he had never felt before. He felt connected, not just to this world or these people, but to a future he would never see. He was part of something larger than himself. He was helping to build something that would outlast him. It was, he realized, a very Terran feeling. The Council was not pleased with his reports. They had expected failure. They had expected to use the Terran colony as an example of overreach and hubris. Instead, they were getting documentation of steady progress and remarkable adaptation. You have become biased, one council member accused during a review session. You have spent too much time among the Terrans. You have lost your objectivity. With respect, Crystal replied, I have gained perspective. I have seen what these beings can do when they put their minds to it. They are not failing. They are succeeding. And we should pay attention because they are doing something no other species in the galaxy has ever done. Transforming a toxic world. It has been done before. Not like this, not so quickly, not with such determination. The Terrans do not merely terraform. They transform themselves. They become part of the world they are changing. They make it their own through sheer force of will. The Council dismissed his concerns. The Terrans were a curiosity, nothing more. Their short lives made them desperate and foolish. They would eventually fail as all such ambitious projects failed. It was only a matter of time. But Crystal knew better. He had seen the children playing in the tunnels. He had watched the colonists planting seeds they would never see bloom. He had felt the strange, fierce love that drove them to sacrifice for futures they would never witness. The Terrans were not going to fail. They were going to succeed. And when they did, the galaxy would have to reckon with what that meant. He returned to Verath 7 and continued his work. He helped in the greenhouses. He assisted with atmospheric monitoring. He learned the names of the colonists and the stories of their families. He became, in some small way, part of their community. And he watched as the dead world slowly, impossibly, began to come alive. 5 standard cycles after the first colony ships landed, Verath 7 was transformed. Not completely. It was still a harsh world, still dangerous, still requiring protective equipment for surface activities. but the change was undeniable. The atmosphere had shifted. Sulfur dioxide was down by 15%, replaced by increasing concentrations of oxygen and nitrogen. The acid rain had weakened, becoming less corrosive as the engineered organisms processed the toxic compounds. In some areas near the largest processor installations, the air was almost breathable. Life was spreading across the surface. The engineered organisms had evolved and diversified, creating a primitive ecosystem where none had existed before. Mats of blue-green bacteria covered the rock near water sources. Strange, tough plants with thick waxy leaves grew in sheltered valleys. Small organisms that the colonists called rock crawlers moved through the soil, breaking it down and making it more hospitable for other life. And the colony had grown into a nation. 50,000 Terrans now called Verath 7 home. They had built cities under domes and underground, connected by a transportation network that spanned the planet. They had established industries and universities and hospitals. They had created art and music and literature that reflected their unique experience as pioneers on a toxic world. Ambassador Crystal stood on the observation platform where he had planted his hope tree 5 years ago. The tree had grown, its silver trunk now as thick as his arm, its branches spreading wide. Around it, a small garden had developed, with flowers and shrubs that the colonists had planted over the years. He was not wearing a full environmental suit. The suit he wore now was lighter, designed for the improved conditions. He still needed a breathing mask, but the protective layers were minimal. In another few years, even the mask might be unnecessary. Dr. Chen stood beside him, as she often did. She had aged in the Terran way, her hair now streaked with gray, her face marked with lines. But her eyes were still bright, still full of that strange, fierce hope that defined her species. "We're ahead of schedule," she said. "The ecosystem is developing faster than our models predicted. The organisms are adapting and evolving in ways we didn't expect. Life wants to live, it turns out. Give it any chance at all and it will find a way." "The Council has requested a formal review," Crystal said. "They want to send a delegation to observe your progress." "Let them come. Let them see what we've done. Let them understand what's possible." Below them, a group of children was playing in the garden, running between the plants and laughing. They wore light clothing and simple masks, nothing like the heavy suits required when the colony was young. For them, this was normal. This was home. "They're the first generation," Dr. Chen said, watching them. "The ones born here, raised here, who have never known any other world. They don't see this as a hostile environment. They see it as their planet, their home." "Do they know how much it cost? How many people died to make this possible?" "We teach them. We make sure they remember the sacrifices. But we also teach them to look forward, to keep building, to keep improving. The past matters, but the future matters more." One of the children ran up to them, a girl of about 8 years with dark curly hair and bright eyes. She held up a flower she had picked, purple with orange spots, a variety that the colonists had engineered specifically for Verath 7. "Ambassador Crystal, look what I found, it's a sunset flower." Bent down to examine it. The flower was beautiful, its colors reminiscent of the spectacular sunsets that painted the sky when the toxic atmosphere caught the star's light. The colonists had created it as a tribute to their world, a living piece of art. "It's lovely," he said. "Did you grow this yourself?" "My class grew them. We have a garden at school. We grow all kinds of things. Teacher says that someday the whole planet will be covered in gardens." "Your teacher is probably right." The girl beamed and ran back to her friends, clutching her flower. Crystal watched her go, feeling again that strange connection to a future he would never see. "The Council will not believe it," he said. "They expect failure. They expect us to report that the colony is struggling, that the transformation is stalled, that the Terrans have finally reached the limits of their ability. Then show them the truth. Show them the gardens and the children and the spreading life. Show them what we've done in 5 years and let them imagine what we'll do in 50. Crystal nodded slowly. They may not want to imagine that. They may find it threatening. Threatening? Dr. Chen looked surprised. Why would our success threaten anyone? Because if you can do this, if you can take dead worlds and make them live, then there is no limit to where you can go. No world is beyond your reach. No environment can stop you. The elder races have always assumed that the galaxy has natural boundaries, places where life cannot exist. You are proving them wrong. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Is that a problem? For some, perhaps. Change is always frightening to those who benefit from the way things are. They stood in silence, watching the children play. The sun was beginning to set, and the sky was turning colors, purple and gold and shades that had no names. The toxic atmosphere that had once seemed like a curse was creating beauty unlike anything else in the galaxy. We're not trying to threaten anyone, Dr. Chen said finally. We're just trying to live, to grow, to build futures for our children. That's all we've ever wanted. I know, and that is perhaps the most threatening thing of all. The delegation from the council arrived a month later. They came in a grand ship, decorated with the symbols of a dozen elder races, carrying representatives who had never set foot on a hostile world in their lives. They expected to find a struggling colony clinging to survival. They expected to find vindication for their predictions of failure. They found a garden instead. Crystal led them through the colony, showing them the cities and the greenhouses and the spreading ecosystem. He introduced them to the colonists, to the scientists and the farmers and the children who had never known any other home. He let them see the truth with their own eyes. The delegates were shocked. They had not believed the reports. They had assumed exaggeration, bias, perhaps even falsification. But the evidence was undeniable. The Terrans were succeeding. They were transforming a world that should have been forever dead. How is this possible? One delegate demanded. This world was toxic, completely hostile to life. How could you change it so quickly? Dr. Chen answered as she had answered so many times before. Work, patience, sacrifice. We don't have magic. We don't have technology beyond what anyone else could develop. We just have the will to keep going, even when it seems impossible. We have hope. Hope is not a strategy. No, it's not. But it's a motivation. It keeps us working when we want to give up. It keeps us planting seeds we'll never see bloom. It keeps us believing that the future will be better than the present if we just keep trying. The delegate had no response to this. None of the elder races thought in such terms. They planned for their own lives, their own generations. The idea of sacrificing for a distant future was alien to them. But Crystal understood. He had learned over these 5 years what it meant to be Terran. It meant looking beyond yourself. It meant caring about people you would never meet. It meant believing that your work mattered, even if you would never see its results. It meant planting hope trees. The delegation left Verath 7 with their reports and their recordings and their carefully neutral assessments. But Crystal knew that nothing would ever be the same. The Terrans had proven something that the galaxy had never believed possible. They had shown that there were no truly dead worlds, only worlds waiting for someone stubborn enough to bring them to life. 10 standard cycles after the founding of the colony, Ambassador Crystal attended a ceremony that he had never expected to witness. For the first time in Verath 7 history, a group of colonists walked outside without any breathing equipment at all. The area was small, just a few square kilometers near the main settlement where the atmospheric processors had been working longest. The air was still not perfect. It was thin and had a strange mineral taste, but it was breathable. It was alive. Dr. Chen was among the group. She was old now by Terran standards, her hair completely white, her face deeply lined. But she walked with her head held high, breathing the air that she had spent decades creating, standing on soil that she had helped transform from barren rock to living earth. "This is not the end," she said, addressing the crowd that had gathered to watch. "This is just the beginning. In another 10 years, this zone will be twice as large. In 20 years, half the planet will be breathable. In 50 years, our grandchildren will walk freely across this world, and they will barely remember a time when that was impossible." The crowd cheered. They were Terrans, all of them, united by their strange, fierce hope and their stubborn refusal to accept limits. They had come to a dead world and made it live. They had turned poison into gardens. Crystal watched from the edge of the crowd, feeling emotions that he still did not fully understand. Pride, perhaps, wonder certainly, and something else, something that felt like love. He had spent 10 years among these people. He had watched them struggle and fail and get up and try again. He had seen them mourn their dead and celebrate their births. He had helped them plant hope trees and grow gardens in impossible places. He was still an observer, still a representative of the council, but he was also something more. He was a friend. After the ceremony, Dr. Chen found him standing by his hope tree. It had grown tall over the years, its silver branches spreading wide, providing shade for the garden that had grown around it. Flowers bloomed at its base, and small creatures moved through the undergrowth, living things that had not existed on this world when he first arrived. "You planted that on your first visit," Dr. Chen said, standing beside him. "I remember. You said you wanted to understand why we did what we do." "I still don't fully understand," Crystal admitted. "But I feel it now. I feel connected to something larger than myself. I feel like I am part of a future I will never see." That's exactly it. That's what it means to hope. Not to expect good things for yourself, but to believe that good things are possible for those who come after. They stood together in silence, watching the sun set. The sky was different now than it had been 10 years ago. The colors were softer, less harsh as the atmosphere changed, but it was still beautiful. It was still uniquely Verath 7. "I have to return to the council," Crystal said. "They want a final report. They want me to tell them what I've learned." "What will you tell them?" Considered the question carefully. He thought about all the reports he had sent over the years, all the data and observations and carefully neutral assessments. He thought about the delegates who had visited and left in shock. He thought about the elder races who had laughed when the Terrans requested settlement rights to toxic worlds. "I will tell them the truth," he said finally. "I will tell them that the Terrans have done something extraordinary. I will tell them that the galaxy is changing and that they need to pay attention. I will tell them that hope is not a weakness. It is a strength, perhaps the greatest strength of all." Dr. Chen smiled. It was still an unsettling expression, all those teeth visible at once, but Crystal had learned to see the warmth behind it. "Will they listen?" "Some of them perhaps, others will dismiss it, others will be afraid, but I will tell them anyway, because the truth matters even when it is uncomfortable, even when it changes everything." He reached out and touched the trunk of his hope tree. The bark was rough under his fingers, alive with the slow pulse of growth. "May I ask you something, Dr. Chen?" "Of course." "When you first came here, did you truly believe you could succeed? Did you truly believe that you could turn this world into a garden?" Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "No, I didn't believe it, not really. I hoped, but hope is not the same as belief. I thought we might fail. I thought we might all die. I thought we might struggle for years and years and never see any real progress." "Then why did you come?" "Because someone had to try. Because even if we failed, at least we would have tried. And because I believed that trying mattered, even if succeeding was uncertain. That's the thing about hope, Ambassador. It doesn't require certainty. It only requires the willingness to act as if the future might be good, even when you don't know if it will be." Thought about this. It was such a Terran way of thinking. Illogical, perhaps, unreasonable, certainly, but also beautiful, and as he had learned, surprisingly effective. "Thank you," he said, "for teaching me, for showing me, for letting me be part of this. Thank you for being willing to learn. Most of your kind never would have bothered." They embraced then, a Terran gesture that Crystal had come to appreciate. It was awkward with his different body shape, but they managed. And for a moment, standing beneath his hope tree on a world that had been poison and was now garden, Crystal felt at home. He left Verath 7 the next day, carrying his final report. But he knew he would return. He had planted something here that he could not abandon. A tree, yes, but also something more. A piece of himself. A stake in a future he would probably never see. That was what it meant to be Terran, he realized. And somehow, over these 10 years, he had become a little bit Terran himself. 25 standard cycles after the founding of the colony, Ambassador Crystal returned to Verath 7 for the last time. He was old now, even by Valorian standards, and the journey was difficult. But he had to see. He had to witness what had grown from the seeds he had helped plant so long ago. The planet that greeted him was not the one he remembered. The sky was blue. Not the harsh chemical blue of the early years, but a soft, gentle blue that reminded him of Earth photographs he had seen. Clouds drifted across it, white and fluffy, carrying rain that was water now rather than acid. The air was clean and fresh and full of the scent of growing things. And everywhere he looked, there were gardens. The black volcanic rock was covered in vegetation now. Forests spread across the hills, green and lush and full of life. Fields of crops stretched to the horizon, feeding a population that had grown to over 1 million. Cities rose above the landscape, still domed in some places but increasingly open to the sky as the air became fully breathable. Crystal descended to the surface in a shuttle, but he did not need an environmental suit. He stepped out onto the landing pad and breathed the air of Verath 7 as freely as he would breathe the air of his homeworld. A young woman was waiting for him. She had dark curly hair and bright eyes, and she wore the simple clothing of a colonial citizen. Something about her was familiar, though Crystal could not immediately place it. "Ambassador Crystal," she said, extending her hand in the Terran greeting. "I'm so honored to meet you. My name is Sarah Chen. My grandmother told me so much about you." Felt something twist in his chest. "Dr. Chen, your grandmother, is she?" "She passed away 5 years ago, I'm afraid. But she lived a long and wonderful life. She was over 90 when she died, and she spent her last day in the garden, surrounded by her family, breathing the air she helped create." Tears formed in Crystal's eyes, a Terran response he had somehow acquired over the decades. "I would have liked to see her one more time. She knew you were coming back. She told me to bring you to her tree. She said you would understand." Young Sarah led him through the settlement, which was barely recognizable from the struggling colony he remembered. The tunnels and domes were still there, but they were historic sites now, preserved as memorials to the early days. The real city spread out under the open sky, with parks and plazas and buildings that glittered in the sunlight. They came at last to a garden that Crystal knew. His hope tree stood at its center, enormous now, its silver branches reaching toward the sky. But beside it stood another tree, smaller but still tall, planted some years later. A plaque at its base read, "In memory of Dr. Sarah Chen, who planted hope and watched it grow." Beneath the plaque was an urn containing her ashes, returned to the soil she had helped transform. Knelt before the memorial, his old joints protesting. He touched the earth, feeling the life that pulsed through it. This soil had once been barren rock, toxic and dead. Now it was alive with organisms, teeming with potential, part of a complex ecosystem that grew more diverse every year. "She changed everything," he said. "She and all the others who came here, they did the impossible." "She would have said she just did her part," young Sarah replied. "That's what she always told us. No one person transforms a world. It takes generations working together, building on what came before. She planted seeds, but we're the ones who get to see the garden. Crystal stood and looked around at the garden, at the trees and flowers and small creatures that moved through the undergrowth. He thought about all the reports he had written over the years, all the testimony he had given to the council, all the arguments he had made about Terran capability and Terran hope. The council had eventually come to accept what the Terrans could do. They had no choice. Vereth 7 was just one of dozens of worlds that Terran colonists had transformed. Dead moons had become thriving habitats. Toxic hellscapes had become agricultural paradises. Places that the elder races had considered worthless were now valuable territories, claimed and developed by the stubborn species that refused to accept limits. It had changed everything. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted as the Terrans expanded into territories no one else wanted. They had become a major force, not through conquest or aggression, but through simple transformation. They took the broken places and made them whole. "I have a request," Crystal said. "When I die, I would like my ashes to be brought here. I would like to be buried beneath my tree in the soil of this world I helped transform." Young Sarah looked surprised. "You want to be buried here, not on your homeworld?" "This is my homeworld now, or at least part of it is. I left something of myself here 25 years ago when I planted that first tree. I have been connected to this place ever since. It seems fitting that I should return to it." "We would be honored." They stood together beneath the silver trees, looking out over the garden that had once been a wasteland. Birds sang in the branches, real birds descended from Terran stock, adapted to Vereth 7. Insects buzzed among the flowers. Small animals moved through the undergrowth. Life was everywhere, abundant and varied and beautiful. "Tell me," Crystal said, "what comes next? You have transformed this world. You have made it a garden. What will you do now?" Young Sarah smiled, and in her smile, Crystal saw her grandmother and all the generations of Terrans who had refused to give up. "There are other worlds, other toxic places that everyone says are impossible, other dead rocks waiting for someone to bring them to life. We'll go there. We'll do what we did here. We'll turn poison into gardens, one world at a time. It will take generations." "That's fine, we have time. Or rather, we make time. We invest in futures we'll never see. That's what being Terran means." Crystal nodded. He understood now, in a way he had not understood when he first arrived 25 years ago. The Terrans were not like other species. They did not think in terms of individual lifespans or single generations. They thought in terms of continuity, of connection, of the endless chain of past and future that linked all of them together. They planted trees whose shade they would never sit in, and that was their greatest strength. "I have one more report to write," Crystal said. "One final assessment for the council. I have been thinking about it for a long time, trying to find the right words." "What will you say?" Crystal turned to face her, this young woman who carried the legacy of her grandmother and all the pioneers who had come before. "I will say that the Terrans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they are violent, they are not. Not because they are cruel, are the opposite. But because they have something that no other species possesses. They have hope that transcends death. They have love that reaches beyond their own lives. They have the ability to sacrifice for futures they will never see." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I will tell them that the Terrans cannot be stopped, not because they are powerful, but because they refuse to give up. I will tell them that any world the Terrans claim will eventually become a garden because that is what they do. They transform things. They make broken places whole. They turn death into life." And will they listen? Some of them will. Others will continue to underestimate you as they always have. But eventually, everyone will understand. Everyone will see what I have seen. A toxic world turned into a paradise. A dead place brought to life. The impossible made real through nothing more than work and patience and hope. Young Sarah reached out and took his hand. Thank you, Ambassador, for seeing us, for understanding us, for being part of our story. Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for teaching me how to hope. They stood together beneath the silver trees as the sun set over Verath 7, painting the sky in colors that were softer now but still beautiful. The garden stretched out around them, a testament to 25 years of work and sacrifice and stubborn refusal to accept limits. And somewhere in the soil of this world that had once been poison, the ashes of pioneers rested, their work complete, their legacy alive in every leaf and flower and breath of clean air. Wrote his final report that night. It was long and detailed and full of data and observations, but at its heart was a simple message, one that he hoped the Council would finally understand. When Terran colonists claim toxic worlds, they make them gardens within years, not because they are special, not because they have superior technology, but because they have hope, they have patience, they have love that reaches beyond their own lives. And that, more than any weapon or strategy or alliance, is what makes them unstoppable. The report was received by the Council. It was debated and discussed and filed away in the great archives where all important documents eventually rested. But its true impact was not measured in policy changes or diplomatic shifts. Its true impact was measured in the way it changed how other species thought about the Terrans. They were not dangerous because they were violent. They were dangerous because they were hopeful. They were dangerous because they refused to accept limits. They were dangerous because they looked at impossible challenges and said, someone has to try. And they were beautiful because, more often than not, they succeeded. Crixtal died 2 years after his final visit to Verath 7. As he had requested, his ashes were brought to the garden and buried beneath his hope tree, beside the memorial to Dr. Sarah Chen. The colonists held a ceremony in his honor, attended by thousands of people who had never met him but who knew his story. His name was added to a plaque beneath the tree, Ambassador Crixtal of the Valorian Diplomatic Corps. He came to observe and stayed to believe. He planted hope in foreign soil and it grew. The tree continued to grow after he was gone. It would grow for centuries more, providing shade and beauty and a living connection to the past. Children would play beneath its branches. Couples would sit in its shade. Generations yet unborn would look up at its silver leaves and remember the early days when this world was poison and a handful of stubborn colonists decided to make it a garden. That was the Terran way. That was what it meant to hope. And across the galaxy, on 100 toxic worlds, Terran colonists continued their work. They planted seeds and engineered organisms and built atmospheric processors. They sacrificed and struggled and sometimes died, but they never gave up. They never stopped believing that the future could be better than the present. Because that was what it meant to be Terran. They planted hope, and hope, as Crixtal had finally learned, could grow anywhere, even in the most toxic soil of all.